Good afternoon, everyone. I am Councilmember Raquel Castañeda-López. Want to welcome you this is so sweet. Want to welcome you to our second annual Consulate reception. We are very committed to putting on this event for multiple reasons, but I'll talk a little bit about why, especially this year, given the change that the country is going through, given the most recent presidential elections. So as co-chair of the Immigration Task Force, we've gotten quite a few questions from many different entities about the city's commitment to being a welcoming city, about the city's commitment to welcoming refugees, about the city's commitment to being a sanctuary city, and supporting the municipal ID program. So I very clearly want to state that I do not believe that the council nor the administration, from what I know, is going to change any of those policies and back down. I know that I just said to Christine Suave, I will die before anyone comes after the immigrant community and tries to take their identification from the municipal ID program. So for me personally, it's over my dead body, but as a legislator, we will fight and do everything that we can and have to protect not only the immigrant communities, but our communities living in poverty, all of our most vulnerable communities in the city of Detroit. And so I want you to take that message to your communities that you're working with and let them know that we remain committed to being a welcoming city. We remain committed to being a sanctuary city and upholding that legislation, that we remain committed to protecting the rights of all of the residents in the city of Detroit. All of the resolutions that we've passed in previous years around refugee resettlement and welcoming those communities, we are still committed to welcoming and resettling refugees in the city of Detroit, and are super excited to launch the municipal ID program. And I will be meeting with the city's attorneys over the next couple of weeks to figure out if there's anything we can do to strengthen that legislation to make sure some of our immigrant communities are protected in that. So know that the vision and the movement to become a diverse, inclusive global city is still strong and going despite the challenges that may lie in front of us with the new administration. So I just wanted to say that to put everyone at ease a little bit before we go ahead and jump into the program. But I wanted to welcome Walter Wegmuller, I don't know if I said that correctly, the new president and honorary of the Consulate Corps, thank you. But he is also the honorary consulate of Switzerland. Where did he go? Oh, you're right here. Okay. You're talking to me. Okay, thank you. To provide welcome on behalf of the Consulate Corps. You're shaking your head. I'm getting distracted.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, thank you very much, Councilwoman, and congratulations, and thank you for all the good things you're doing. It is appreciated. And thank you for inviting me today. Wanted to maybe just say a couple of words of who is the Consulate Corps of Michigan, because it's many times not very well understood. I mean, we're a nonprofit member organization, basically open to the consulates that are represented in Michigan. So typically the active consuls as well as retired consuls. And just so you have a feel for it, we have 40 countries that are currently represented in the state of Michigan, and 34 of them are members of the Consulate Corps. It's not a mandatory membership. We would like to have 100% participation, but there's always a few straddlers that are hard to get. But 34 out of 40 is a pretty good representation. We have a voluntary, a board of directors that are volunteers, so no full-time staffing or anything like that. And as newly elected president, I head up that board. The Consulate Corps has a dean. That's typically the longest running career consul. And we have 7 full consulates, in other words, again, with career diplomats. The 33 other consulates are honorary consuls appointed by their respective governments and approved by the State Department in Washington. But most of those individuals have professional jobs outside of that function. Just like myself, as Honorary Consul of Switzerland, I have been working for Comerica Bank in Detroit in the international department for 39 years, just retired on Friday. So it's kind of nice. I have a transition and hope to be able to devote an adequate amount of time to this new function. So hopefully that explains a little bit as to who we are. We are also kind of networking driven. We obviously want to spread the words of our organization, which wants to promote and support, obviously, good relations for the member countries with the local, municipal, state, and ultimately federal government entities. And we want to promote, obviously, trade, investment, and cultural relationships. As such, we try to network as much as possible. And we're really lucky to have as our programs chairman Fred Hoffman, whom I'm sure you all know, and he's here, who does an outstanding job. I think he's the most connected of anybody in the community and in the industry. So it's fantastic to have him here. Also have the colleague from the Ukraine here, Bodan. Just want to recognize you supporting our consular corps here. And I just noticed we have the Consul General of Japan with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Very happy about that. And hiding in the back is our dear colleague from France, our Honorary Consul, Gaucher. Thank you for joining us for this event. Let me go to the last point, why international relations are important to the city of Detroit. Well, in my opinion, again, we're the hub for international trade. Certainly don't have to go very far, Canada, Mexico, but then also Europe, Asia, basically globally. We're still the motor city in the world, so that also drives a lot of foreign investment into Detroit and the greater Detroit area, of course. And then we're a very diverse population with a lot of immigrants. I am an immigrant. I came here 39 years ago, and many of you are immigrants, and there's many more than us here in this room. So I think that's why international relations and talking to each other and furthering the understanding about different backgrounds, different cultures, and different perceptions can only be a good thing. So with that, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And before I forget, I just really quickly want to thank the team that put on the event today. So one is Hank, who is one of our MSW interns right here. And Ann Roth, one of our policy analysts. And then the rest of Team Rocky, who I think is sitting at the table over there. So many of you are familiar with the next speaker because he works for the governor in the Office of Michigan, the Office of New Americans for the state. So I want to bring up Bingoy really quickly, talk a little bit about Mona's initiatives. And I know that he works very closely with a consulate in different immigrant communities. But for those of you who may not be as involved or aware of the state's efforts to really be a welcoming state, wanted him to share a little bit about that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good afternoon, everyone. I had some prepared remarks that I was going to say, but the circumstances and the situations in the last few days have certainly changed some of those remarks that I had thought about sharing with you today. But first of all, not only say thank you to you, but also for all the representatives here from our Consul General, for the countries that they represent, because I think it's also very important that as we address the challenges that we are facing today, that they become our partners, that they become our allies in this effort as well. Because what they are doing in their particular countries, especially those who are part of the immigrants communities that are being welcomed into their countries, we in the United States can certainly learn a lot from them as well. So we want to thank all of you for being here today and for sharing this time with us. In 2014, Governor Snyder, through executive order, started this new office called the Office for New Americans. His vision for that office was to recognize that the history of our nation and our state was built upon our immigration, was built upon the recognition that these individuals, along with those who already are here, other communities that have been here, but alongside with them, they were instrumental in making sure that we had a state of Michigan, that was culturally rich and economically strong. He understood that as we went through this difficult economic downturn in the state of Michigan, that as we are now climbing back up, that the talent that we need is not only local or regional or statewide, but it is also global. And therefore he said, I want an office who will be able to focus directly on this particular challenge and opportunity that we have in the state of Michigan. So for the Office for New Americans, we focus on 3 areas. We focus on talent, because like I said, talent today is global talent. It's not just our own regional or local talent. We focus on entrepreneurship. We know for a fact that immigrants have always historically been very entrepreneurial. Statistics will tell us that immigrants will most likely start businesses twice as likely than native-born U.S. citizens. And thirdly, the one that I think is the most important. The most important is the governor wants the state of Michigan to make sure that we are being viewed by immigrants across the world and immigrants who are currently residing in the United States of America, that Michigan is a welcoming state. You'll hear more about that effort from Christine, but we also know that, in my opinion as well, and I think governor's opinion as well also, we can have the best public policies, we can pass the best legislation, but immigrants and refugees will not settle in the state of Michigan if we are not welcoming, because their choices are too many to advance their careers or to advance their business ideas in other states in this country. And so that effort requires all of us to work together. We can't work independently, we all must work together. That's why Governor Snyder felt that this was so important, that we must remember the contributions of our immigrants. It also reminds us that it is not only immigrants. We have other communities that have been a part of this great state for a long time, and they too have contributed to the strength of our wonderful state. From a city perspective, I think it was great, and through the efforts of Councilwoman Castañeda-López, Detroit now has its own immigration office, an office that I'm hoping will be followed by other major cities in the state of Michigan. It is absolutely important that this vision and this commitment is also at the local level. And we can be a part of that conversation and a part of that movement if we say and bring our message to other cities, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Flint, Saginaw, Traverse City, all over the state. The value that immigrants bring to our state, again, is not only economics. It is also the richness of their cultural heritage that brings us and gives us a better quality of life for every resident in the state of Michigan. And that is something that we must begin to look at. Also, what we've done on our part, we have established 2, now we have more than 2, but the 2 that I want to highlight is this. Our MITS program, the Michigan International Talent Solution, that's spearheaded by Annie Fenton, that's sitting in the back there, helps us to understand how we must take those new immigrants, those new Americans, all have arrived in the state of Michigan within the last 5 years, that have come here with degrees and work experience from their home country. There must be a way for us to integrate them into our economy. We don't want to be known as the state that has the most educated taxi cab drivers. Not that there's anything wrong with being a taxi cab driver, but we must know that these talents that is available to us must be integrated into our system. So we have that particular program. The other one that I'm really proud of, there are 3 ethnic commissions that's been established in the state of Michigan. It's the Michigan Asian Pacific American Commission, it's the Commission on Middle Eastern Affairs, and it's the Hispanic Latino Commission. The board members are appointed by the governor's office, and we have this year decided to form a coalition together that we call the Joint Legislative Advocacy Committee. And we work together because we believe that a unified voice is much stronger than a singular voice. And we sent our first press release in response to the terrible incidents that have occurred against our children and against our adult population within our immigrant and refugee communities, and even within our African American communities, because they too are feeling the effects of what has happened in our past election. And so that's the model that we're going to continue to pursue, a model of collaboration and partnership. And we thank you so much for all of you who are here representing the Consul Generals, and we invite you to become partners with us, not only the state of Michigan, but also for the city of Detroit. Thank you.
Thank you, Bing. And I know many of you work closely with the state, but I think it's important to reemphasize, especially post Tuesday's election, regardless of how you voted, just to emphasize the state's commitment to being a welcoming state, as well as the city's commitment and how we work closely in partnership. So Bing mentioned, and I mentioned, that the state of Michigan is a welcoming state, and so we wanted to bring up the coordinator of that program, Welcoming Michigan, here, Christine Sauvé, to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing in partnership around Detroit as a welcoming city and some of the branding that we hope to roll out next spring.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Bing. Yes, we're very excited that Detroit is a welcoming city. Detroit is one of 12 welcoming cities in the state. So as Bing mentioned, it's a movement that's growing across our state. And these cities can learn from each other in terms of what strategies and policies and practices and messages can be shared to make sure that everyone feels welcomed and included in the community, longtime residents as well as newcomers. And I should mention that all of these welcoming cities are members of a national network. So there's, it's increasing every day, but I think we're at 64 welcoming cities nationwide. So it's exciting to be part of a larger national network as well. Again, this is a movement that is taking place across the country, and it's heartening, especially after some of the events of over the past week. So this commitment of being a welcoming city is so important in this moment. It was important before, but especially now, to make sure that all of our community members know that they are valued and respected, and that we respect our immigrant friends and family and neighbors, and we want them here, we care about them, and we will work to support and protect them. That message is so important to hear from our local elected officials, as well as all of our community members. And, again, it's not just immigrants and refugees that have been targets of bias incidents over the past week. It's been affecting all of our community members. So it's important to make sure that we're all working together to reach out to longtime residents and help them get to know some of their new immigrant or refugee neighbors. Sometimes breaking down those barriers and dispelling some of the myths and stereotypes can go a long way into building that community-wide support for welcoming, which we will definitely need moving forward. And again, as being emphasized, this is so important at the local level. As rhetoric and messages come from the national level, we need to make sure that our local communities feel like safe, inclusive environments, and that the local policies we have in place, we maintain and strengthen and stand by. So a lot of important work before us. So through the Task Force Subcommittee on Community Engagement and Marketing, we have worked to pull together this brand, this image that will help this welcoming movement expand throughout the city. And so we are very excited about planning some launch events and activities to engage residents across the city and having conversations about who is a Detroiter and what are our shared values and how can we make sure that there's space for all of us in the city, and emphasizing again that we're all valued members of the community. So stay tuned for some of that, some of those events. I know I see some of our committee members here today who are busy working on this. And we'll share this information with you if you'd like to get involved and support some of those events. And again, the image, it's not to sell a product, it's to really galvanize the whole community around this movement. And it will be creating a space for longtime US-born community members to feel a part of this process, to be respected as members of the community as well as newcomers. So trying to create a space where newcomers and longtime residents can have conversations together. And I'll just close with a little bit of a story. So my great-grandfather came from Sicily, and he worked as a sanitation worker for the city of Detroit. And he experienced a lot of discrimination at the time. My grandfather had to translate for him. His English was very limited, and he struggled quite a bit. And I shared with my grandfather, the work that we're doing now, and he was just blown away. He's, as a young person, he often had to translate messages of discrimination for his own father, interacting with people in the community, and had to tell his dad, no, they don't want you to do X, Y, Z. And, the underlying message was, you're not one of us. And so to know that the city is taking this route now is very powerful. And I think it will be extremely important for the generations of immigrants and refugees that are coming today, and making sure that we're including our longtime residents as well. So thanks for this opportunity, and stay in touch.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Christine. And I think Dr. El-Sayed, I saw you. Okay, cool. So next speaker before we get into the presentation, which is the big chunk of material here. One is, last year we featured someone from the city of Detroit. It was the Director of Immigrant Affairs, Dr. Fayrouz Saad, and wanted to feature someone else that works in the city, the head of the health department, to share a little bit of his personal story and just the importance of being a welcoming city as well, and immigration in the city of Detroit specifically. So I'd like to bring to the front Dr. El-Sayed, who is the Executive Director of the Health and Human Services Department for the city, to talk a little bit about his journey kind of to the city and his personal background.
Thank you so much for having me. Are we being taped, or can I just drop the mic? So mic. Okay. I'm honored to be here. My dad began our American journey in 1978 when he got off an airplane that had come from Egypt. And he recounts this story of going to a McDonald's, because that was sort of the icon of America. And he asked the woman who was at the register, he says, I want some batatas, please. And she had no idea what he said. Which was, he wanted some potatoes, please, which he was talking about fries. Now he calls them fries, but that was after what would have been about 38 years of living in the United States, and still has that really hard Egyptian PB. Detroit, for our family, growing up as a third culture kid in an Egyptian American household, Detroit was always that one place I could claim, and nobody would ask whether or not I in fact was from Detroit. Because when people ask you where you're from and you're a brown kid with a funny name, that means a lot of things, right? They'll say, where are you from? And you say, well, I'm from Detroit. They're like, no. Where are you from? You're like, well, that means a lot of things for me. Egyptian American, born and raised right here. And so Detroit and Detroit symbols were always things I could grasp on. I could always say, I root for the Red Wings and the Tigers and the Lions. I'm a Michigan fan. There's no doubt that this is a place that's mine and my own. And for me, I grew up in and around the city. I spent about 6 years away in grad school, and then had the opportunity to come home and help to build an institution that is focused around what I think are critical shared ideals between the work that we do in public health and the work of immigration and diversity and inclusion. Because public health is what we as a society do collectively to assure conditions within which people can be healthy. We collectively as a society do to assure conditions within which people can be healthy. That is fundamentally about appreciating what we do together, about how we build a place that is inclusive and that values the different things that people bring to a table, and is focused around our collective mutual well-being. I'll tell you, I never felt as questioned in my American identity as I did last week on Wednesday. And my wife wears a scarf. We are adherents to the Muslim faith, and she works in Ann Arbor, where she's a psychiatry resident. And that morning when I said goodbye to her on her way to work, I had never felt as scared for her. And this is I grew up, I went to high school during 9/11, and that was part of our American experience. But the thing about 9/11 was that it was an event that fundamentally reshaped what it meant to be Muslim and Arab in the United States. But it wasn't a fundamental repudiation on a set of values that allow one to exist seamlessly, or at least as close to seamlessly as possible. And this, for a lot of folks, seems to be that. This last weekend, I was really lucky to have won a Rhodes Scholarship. And one of the nice things about being a Rhodes Scholar is that you are part of selecting the future Rhodes Scholars. And there was a young woman who was interviewing for the scholarship this last weekend, and she was a young Bengali immigrant woman who wears a scarf, who's also on her student council at University of Kansas. And she gave a fantastic interview, fantastic. She was one of our top applicants going in and ended up receiving the scholarship. But afterwards, there was this moment where somebody said, she seems really angry. And I don't know that that's something that we want to get behind. And there was a second where I had to step back and say, well, what is the role of anger toward the goals of inclusion and diversity? And what is it that it means when a young woman like her stands up, decides to fearlessly be who she is in a moment where that's entirely under question? And I think what is so inspiring about her to me is that she was who she was, and we will be who we will be. And that means the individuals who makes the city what it is, but also as a city. There's this Detroit versus everybody lore. And I think never was that more important than today, because we are a city of diversity. We can't, that is indelible in our history and in our identity. Detroit was the city that welcomed my family here, and this is why we stay and we serve here. And it is a moment where we have to shamelessly stand up and say, this is a part of America. We are a part of America, and we will continue to be this part of America regardless of what we hear about what you think about what America ought to be. So I'm honored and thankful to be serving here. I think a lot of what we will do as a society to come together starts in the cities where we know the value of diversity because we live it every day. And I'm honored to have had the opportunity to share my story, and would love, if I unfortunately have to get off to another meeting, but if there are ever questions or things that you'd like to work on with us at the health department, we are more than excited to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Said. I think it's important, especially for this group, to know that not only are we saying we're a welcoming city and we stand by our commitment to remaining diverse and inclusive, but that we're kind of walking the walk, right? That throughout the administration, throughout council, that we have people who come from immigrant communities that understand the challenges that our communities face and are very committed to not only defending those communities, but growing those relationships locally as well as globally. So with that, I'm going to jump into the quick presentation of some of the work that you've already heard about so far today of what we've accomplished since creating the Immigration Task Force over the last 3 years. So you can see here, can people see here? I know the lighting is a little bit off. Okay. In 2014 was when the task force was actually created in that spring of 2014. As Christine said, we became a welcoming city. That was one of our first things that we accomplished, and we became the 41st welcoming city in the country. Part of our first initiatives or tasks was to work with the Michigan Department of Transportation to change the signage around the Canada Bridge. So how many of you have ever accidentally ended on the wrong place when you're driving to Canada? Okay, a couple of people have. The sign didn't have the flag of Canada and of the United States before, but it does now, in case you haven't noticed that when you were driving through, to distinguish between where you will be exiting the U.S. and where you would be entering Canada. And that may seem very small and insignificant, but is actually incredibly helpful for helping people not to get lost and end up on the Canadian side and then having to go through immigration and customs and maybe finding themselves in situations that they don't want to be in or need to be in. So although it may seem small, we're very proud and happy that that was something we accomplished within the first year, was addressing the signage around the Canada Bridge. Last year, if any of you guys came out, you would have met the Director of Immigrant Affairs, Fayrouz Saad. So we were successful in working with the Mayor's office to create the city's first ever Office of Immigrant Affairs in 2014. And have been able to work with Ms. Saad very closely around different initiatives that you'll hear more about later in the presentation. Last year, I think some of you may have come, the city hosted its first annual Naturalization Ceremony with the USCIS. A beautiful ceremony that was hosted here in the auditorium. There's video, I think, that you can look up online. This year, we hosted the second one. And then you'll see at the bottom, the third point, Bangla Town launch. So of the subcommittees that were mentioned, one of the subcommittees is Economic Development on the Immigration Task Force. And that subcommittee decided to focus on kind of branding and coming up with brands for different immigrant communities and a toolkit that can be replicated in different neighborhoods throughout the city. So there was an official launch last year. The governor came down for the ribbon cutting, and they continue to do great things with Bangla Town. This year, 3 really large things actually that we've accomplished is one with the passage of the municipal ID laws. How many of you here are familiar with the municipal ID program? Okay, about maybe almost 3/4. That's good. So it's set to roll out actually, I believe, December 7th or the 9th. December 7th? Okay, December 7th. And we're going to go into more detail about that program. But we're super happy about that. It passed unanimously within council and will definitely help quite a few of our communities. Language access plan funding. It was the first time that we were able to get close to $500,000 to help develop a comprehensive language accessibility plan for the city. And then, as Christine kind of mentioned, the Detroit Our City movement is a brand that will be rolling out next spring. Okay, so you can't read this. The greatest is a little bit small. I think it's because I'm close, so I'm not seeing it as well. But basically, this is a little bit background about the Immigration Task Force. This task force really consists of stakeholders throughout the city and the region, working with different ethnic groups and immigrant groups in the city of Detroit, from all regions, from Africa, from Asia, from the Middle East, from the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America. And these individuals really have been doing the work in the trenches for the past 10, 20 years. And so really the role that we played as a city was kind of convening everyone to be able to work on these issues in a collective manner. And as you kind of mingle afterwards, you'll see that the task force members have all different types of expertise. So whether it's economic development, social services, education, there's a broad spectrum. Okay, so here's a breakdown of the subcommittees. We have one committee that focuses on municipal services, which I chair with my staff member Ann Roth. And so anything related to government services, that would be handled in the municipal services subcommittee. We have another subcommittee that focuses on immigrant rights. The subcommittee was responsible for getting the signage changed with the Michigan Department of Transportation. And that's chaired by Susan Reed, it's co-chaired by Jose Franco. The other subcommittee is economic development, which is chaired by Steve Tabakman and co-chaired by Isan Takbim, who's here tonight. And they are the ones that spearheaded the efforts around branding Bangla Town, and will hopefully roll it out to other communities. Christine talked about the marketing and engagement subcommittee, which is chaired by Christine, which focuses on doing a series of listening sessions, but also on this brand launch. The fifth subcommittee is repopulation, which is chaired by Wojciech, who is not here tonight, but they're really working very closely with the Office of Immigrant Affairs around refugee resettlement. And last but not least is social services and education, which I believe Marshall Hunt was here, but I think he left, who is currently the chair. And what things they've been working on are related to compiling a list of resources around ESL classes. There's a whole lot of, I think they're currently working on one around medical documents and different clinics and such that are familiar with working with immigrant populations. If I go too fast, guys, just let me know, because I talk very fast. Okay, you're okay so far. So this is just a map that Christine mentioned that of the different welcoming cities throughout the country. You can't read this list from where you are, but it's pretty cool to see that there's some major cities and a lot of smaller cities as well, really throughout the country, that have jumped on board to become part of Welcoming America. We would love to see some of these other states join up as well. So if you have any contacts with other consulates in those states, let them know. So a little bit more about the Office of Immigrant Affairs. This is the director, Fayrouz Saad, and her executive programs coordinator, Taylor Nelson, who are currently working very closely with the director of the municipal ID program to roll that out. Also working around the refugee resettlement program. It's been in existence just over a year, so still a very young office. We're going to be working with them next year to get more funding to be able to do more work in the office, but they were successful at winning a grant to get a couple AmeriCorps fellows to work with them over the next year, and so we're excited to see how that'll help them grow as an office. Municipal IDs, which I believe I'm going to turn it over to Jose Franco to talk a little bit more in depth about that program, but just wanted to give a little bit background in that this initiative came from the Subcommittee of Immigrant Rights on the task force. It was one of the primary goals, but really it was a coalition that came together to get the legislation passed, ranging from members of the homeless community to the immigrants community, to the LGBTQ community, to seniors, and to youth, wanting to see this happen to remove many of the barriers that prevent people from accessing IDs. So, and you can see a list of some of the other major municipalities that already have the municipal ID program. We've worked very closely with the city of New York to model ours after theirs and offer a whole host of benefits with the card. But with that, I'll turn it over to Jose, who's going to talk a little bit more in depth about the details of the program, and then we'll go back into wrapping up the program. Oh, do you have to switch yours?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jose Franco. I am the new program coordinator for the City of Detroit's ID program, and I come from an immigrants' rights background. I'm actually the co-founder of One Michigan for Immigrant Rights, and kind of the way that I got this job was through that work, through the advocacy that I've done with One Michigan, and for the past 3 or so years, we were trying to push something like the municipal ID to come forward in the city of Detroit, and we were here back here when the vote happened with like over 100 of our members just cheering on the victory, and we're going to continue working on, One Michigan is going to continue working on advocating for the city ID and helping people fill out the applications and translating for them if need be. So what I'm going to go over right now is sort of in detail more of what the program is about. This is an early mock-up of the city ID. It's changed a little. There's more security features in it, but kind of overall, that's how it's going to look. So yeah, it made a lot of news the day that it came out back in May. So who we're trying to aim this city ID program for is the most vulnerable communities. So the immigrant community, those that don't have permanent housing, criminal records will not affect you in getting this ID. Your gender will not be displayed on the ID. That's a big issue with a lot of within the LGBTQ community. The cost of the City ID program for everybody who is 18 and up is $25. Anybody below 18, it's $10, and if you're over 62, also $10. And there will be a fee discount. We called it a fee waiver, but we had to change it to discount. So if you meet certain requirements, we're still working on the final details, you'll be able to get your ID for $10 as well. And our City ID program is based on a 300-point system that we copied from Washtenaw County, which is Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and a few other smaller towns. So let's see if it can zoom in enough. So basically, category A is basically your proving who you are as a person. So identification, if you have a passport or a expired ID, you can use that to prove who you are identity-wise. And then category B are secondary evidence that you can use. So you can use your EBT card, which is like another form of identification for many. Your birth certificate, it has to be certified, translated in order to be able to use it. Your social security card is another avenue that you can use. And then the last one, which is very important, is you got to prove that you live in the city of Detroit. So if you have a utility bill, employment record, like a pay stub, that's enough to like prove that you live in the city of Detroit. And you have to have that within the last 30 days. And like Raquel said, it's based off of other programs around the country. Ours is basically off of the New York program. And actually, the company that hired me on to do this work, SF Global, they have a similar program in Oakland and Richmond, California. And right now, we have 2 intake centers where we're going to be doing this work. Panon Park is in Southwest Detroit, which is heavily immigrant populated, and a lot of Latinos live in that area. And then Samaritan Center, which is on the Lower East Side, is going to focus on the rest of the population, so the homeless population. And a lot of people don't know that the African American population has also a hard time getting IDs, so this will help out as well. Our hours of operation, Monday and Wednesdays, 1 to 7 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 to 6 p.m. The reason we did this is a lot of times people can't actually go out and get IDs during the week, so we want to make it as accessible as possible by having our Saturday operations open for 8 hours from 10 to 6, so that's why we did that. And we have bilingual staff on hand. We have 3 Spanish speakers, 1 Arabic speaker, and we have another person who actually speaks 3 languages, Bengali and Hindi, or I forget the other language, but there's 3 that he speaks, so it's awesome that we have a very diverse group of intake specialists. And the way that it will work is, ideally, we're going to have a website where people go to and set up their appointment, and that way, it's easier for us to like see who's actually coming in. And then once you come into the actual center, you'll present your documents, we'll review them, and if you qualify for it, we'll go ahead and submit all the documentation, and in about 7 or 10 days, you will get your ID card. You have the option of having it shipped to the intake center or shipped directly to your house. And like we said, the program is here to help the vulnerable community, like the immigrants and undocumented population, the homeless and returning citizens, senior citizens, youth, and the LGBT community. And there will be benefits attached to this, so it's not just going to be a card that you just carry around. And there's going to be actual benefits for it. The public sector, the Detroit Police Department will accept this as a valid form of ID. Obviously, it's not going to be a driver's license, and we're going to continue to tell people that that's the case. If you want to go to a Detroit public school, you can use that to enter schools. We have a lot of issues, and specifically in Southwest Detroit, where parents go to their high school and they don't let them in because they don't have any sort of ID. This will help alleviate that concern. And also, the Detroit Water and Sewage Department will accept that as form of valid ID for paying bills or establishing service. In the private sector, we are working with a couple of banks across the city of Detroit. The biggest one that we have so far right now is Huntington Bank. They have agreed to accept it as a valid form of ID to establish a bank account and also make withdrawals with that. If anybody has any close connection with any banks, please go ahead and let me know, because we're trying to get as many banks as possible to be a part of this program. DTE has also agreed to let the city ID holders establish an account and also pay for their services. And in the future, we're trying to integrate the ID card into the library card system and the Detroit public transportation system. So that's something, hopefully, as the program progresses, we'll be able to do. So right now, what we're doing, the program starts on December 7th, and we're doing a lot of stakeholder meetings like this to get people to realize what the program is about and how they can get involved. So if anybody here has any connections with any community organizations in the city of Detroit, please let me know so I can go ahead and do a presentation and educate them on the whole ID process. Initially, it's a 2-year pilot, but the city ordinance states that it's going to exist as long as possible. So right now, we're just testing it out, making sure that we get all the little problems fixed out in the next 2 years. Our initial goal is 35,000 people will apply for the ID program within the next 2 years. What has happened in many cities is they've actually met the goal by a lot. So we hope that we actually get more than 35,000. And that's it pretty much. We already hired our staff members. We have 6 on hand. And right now I just came from putting together the computers. I come from an IT background, so they were like, okay, go ahead and start plugging things in. So that's what we're doing right now is installing all the computers, the cameras, fingerprint scanners, etc. And November, I don't know why it says 12, but it's December 7th is going to be the launch date. And we're going to have the website up and running by the end of this week. And if anybody's interested in getting people to apply, just go to detroitmi.gov, and on the front page there will be a little widget to let people register for the ID program. And that's pretty much it for the ID program.
And so when the official launch happens on the 7th, there'll be a press conference. And then, but if anyone is interested in hosting kind of an info session, I think in your communities, I think let Jose know and he can make that happen. Cool. So something that we're really excited about. Okay, so moving on. I mentioned earlier that we had worked to get funding around language access. So the city has not had a comprehensive language accessibility plan that was actually implemented for quite some time, if ever. So last year we were able to get close to $500,000 set aside to help implement a language accessibility plan. What that means is that we can hire a compliance officer within the Department of Human Rights to make sure that's happening. We can work with the IT department to make sure things are being translated on the website. And the third component is to actually have a company contract with the city to provide on-site language translation as well as interpretation services, not just for people who can't speak English or are limited English speakers, but also for people who are visually and hearing impaired. So that's a huge, huge accomplishment and a huge step forward for the city of Detroit. So hopefully the next year or so, you'll see signage that changes, that has different languages available, that if you need translation when you come to a meeting, spread the word amongst your communities, that will be a service that will be offered. Bangla Town, we talked a little bit about this. These are just some more in-depth details about some of the things we talked about earlier. It was an economic development initiative to brand ethnic neighborhoods and help identify and recognize the contributions of these immigrant communities. And you could see some of the pictures of the area and the ribbon cutting last year when the governor came down. A couple stats from our last two naturalization ceremonies. In 2015, when we hosted it here, there was only 107 new citizens from 37 different countries. And this year, we welcomed 80 new citizens from 30 different countries. And we look forward to hosting that event again here with the USCIS next year. And then a little bit about our brand launch that we'll be doing next spring, Detroit, our city. You have the flyer on your table. We will continue to do listening sessions throughout the city. So far, we've done at least one with the Latino, Bengali, African, Yemeni, and the Caribbean communities, and hope to do more in the next year. And it really is about building this brand that we're hashtagging Dig Detroit, which means diverse, inclusive, global Detroit. And then just in closing, those are just some of the accomplishments and things that we've pulled together in the last 3 years. And in talking to Welcoming America and just kind of having conversations about what's happening in other cities, they are always very impressed with all of the work that we've been able to accomplish in 3 years and in the efforts and steps that we've done to really make the city be seen as a welcoming city locally as well as globally. So with that, they're putting up Christmas lights down the hall, guys. With that, and you'll see, I just wanted to point out, because you just see the Detroit, our city, but when the brand piece actually rolls out, we've been taking pictures of people throughout the city of Detroit. So we have a whole kind of photo journalism piece that'll go with the Detroit, our city brand launch. And you can see here, we will also be able to translate it into different languages. So there'll be different swag, whether it's t-shirts or buttons or magnets and things like that people can get in the different languages to help pass. And ideally, we'd like it to be a brand that businesses start adopting as well, to show that they're welcoming overall and put up signs in their businesses to do so. So I believe that is it. As promised, we finished right on time at 4:30. Yes. Okay, yeah. A word from our sponsors, please. Who are our top? Oh, yes, I see our sponsors here. Okay, but any questions about the presentation or the work that we've done? And I guess not necessarily even questions about what we've done, but do you have any thoughts or ideas? What would you like the city to do or to do more of so that we continue to be more welcoming, and so that when you are talking to your communities or going back home to Mexico or to Germany or wherever it is, that you're really spreading the word that Detroit is a welcoming city, and despite the challenges financially and other ways, that this is a place that people want to be and that they're welcome to come and invest in. So any ideas from any of the consulates here? What would you like to see the city of Detroit do so that we really can help to build the international relations with some of the countries that you represent? Any thoughts? It's a quiz.
Well, I like very much that we're a welcoming city. When I see how many states don't have a city yet, I'm proud that we do.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. So that's your quiz question, guys, is to go back and think, how do we continue to build stronger relationships with the countries that you represent and the city of Detroit, so that we can continue to grow in that capacity and really promote immigration to the city of Detroit and support the communities that are here. So FYI, we'll follow up with you later on. We would love to hear your ideas and your thoughts so that we really can do a better job, right? Yes, Christine. Oh.
More about the welcoming city movement, and you're
Okay.
very fascinated with it. So, folks are kind of sharing strategies and tips right now. So if anyone, in your home country is interested in the country that you represent, we're happy to share and talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other piece in that regard is, if you ever are bringing groups to the city or to the region, please let us know. And if it works out scheduling wise, would love to greet them and just welcome them to the city. Marion, who is with Global Ties, sends a lot of groups our way, and I love being able to talk to people from different countries just to learn about what's going on in their countries, but also to share ideas on how we can become more welcoming. So please do, when you bring guests, have them come by and visit the city. Okay. No, if there's no other questions or comments, then I will turn it over to our sponsors, who I believe, Bing, did you want to add it? Well, we can thank our sponsors. Bing Goy is Director of Michigan Office of New Americans. We can give him a round of applause for being one of our co-sponsors. Wojciech Zolnowski, who I think many of us know is not here today, but want to give a round of applause and thanks to the International Institute of Metropolitan Detroit. And then Isan, did you want to say anything? No? Okay. Okay. This is one of our other co-sponsors, Isan Takbeem, the founding chairman of BAPAC, the Bengali American Public Affairs Commission. So thank you as well. And then last shout out to our wonderful food provider. I don't think she's over there. Oh, there you are, Mako of Gorilla Foods, who did a wonderful job both last year and this year. Detroit-based, very healthy snacks. But wanted to thank you again for coming out and for participating. Cool. And with that, I think we're pretty much done, but I encourage you to stay around, say hello. If you have an idea that came to your head, please come share it with me. Not grab snacks. Happy early Thanksgiving to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you later on.